Yeah, the thing like I was saying, this whole situation with Graham Plattner, it's like, the thing is, like, we don't need to fucking wonder which one of them is doing what, because we don't support reformism, because the type of people who come to the surface, the type of people who get popular, are the rapists, the violent, the fucking cheaters, the liars, the swindlers, the grifters, right? Like, literally. That's like, those are the people who like bubble up to the top in our broken ass system. So, like, the character of Graham Plattner is hardly surprising. And at the end of the day, Don Dark Zoni, welcome in. And at the end of the day, it's like in this video I made a month ago now, where I talked about why reformism, like, it gets us into exactly the type of problem that you see a whole bunch of our friends in the left now having a problem with, because reformism only will ever serve the bourgeoisie, right? I did a whole video on this, if you remember, where we looked at the interview with Chairman Africa. That's what this video was about, is centered on that interview with Chairman Africa. And we talked about the difference between electoralism, reformism, and revolution. So, yeah, check that out. We talked about essentially like the Graham Plattner situation a month ago now, long before these most recent allegations came out. And the reason why I haven't given it, like, his crimes, obviously, he he should fucking pay for the crimes that he's committed against people, but I just can't help but like be a little bit sick to my stomach when I notice that all the people suddenly care now and didn't care when they understood that likely on his overseas tours he has committed unspeakable violence against fucking people around the world that the US designates enemies. But that was all good then, right? That wasn't damaging. That wasn't a damaging credible source, because that was just the high likelihood that, in addition to the violence he engaged in, that he probably engaged in sexual violence as well, right? But nobody would even consider that or think of that. Instead, it was running PR for a Nazi tattoo instead. When a bunch of us were like, a bunch of Marxist Leninists were essentially saying that, right? Yeah, because it was in service to the empire. Exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, this is why I say, even when it comes to the like the best, most vetted DSA candidate in the world, I still don't support it, because reformism will turn that candidate, if they're an independent, into just a reformist. That's what happens. It can't do anything other than that, right? Because if you weren't a reformist, then you would be organized in an independent party. You wouldn't. So there's like no such thing as like an independently running communist. That's the great man theory bullshit, you know? Like they like, there was a picture that I saved, but now I don't see it. That I thought was kind of interesting. I guess I didn't actually save it. Proletarian Potato has given me an idea. Bake some decent potato situation, a handful of them, and also have well-crafted pamphlet promoting class consciousness to accompany it, and offer to people at intersections while out driving. Hey, that's a good idea. Feeding the people. Feeding people while pairing it with revolutionary education, I've said this before, is a great way to go. Want to remind people, they were saying it's privileged to be against a killer vet that later become a merc. Yeah. And that's because there's like this narrative that somehow we can vote our way out of this, or that even voting is harm reduction. And like a bunch of Marxist Leninists point out that like the Bernie Sanders and those reforms are not harm reduction because they're only temporary. And then after the temporary moment where they exist for us is there, then they're pulled away harder than ever, right? Because after like allowing some concessions to labor, then the violent wing of fascism has to come back in and resecure those profits. And then each time it does that, there's less super profits that it has available to secure like that, in a sense. Due to like again, falling rate of profits and revolutions winning all over the world, liberation struggles gaining more and more ground, all of that like shrinks the amount of super profits that they have. And so you can't keep going forever with temporary gains. The whole reason for the temporary gains is to prolong the revolution, to prolong people combating the empire so the empire can keep focusing on trying to expand the borders. That's what it's all about. Exporting that fascist violence as much as possible, right? Yeah, it's just it's well with the DSA really it's a Macius strategy, right? One of like one of running PR for the DNC because they believe that they can get enough insurgent candidates. Some of them even talk about the the DNC as being a hostile party to them, and they will they will say like we're running insurgents in a hostile party, which implies that then they can get enough of these insurgents in to change like the DNC, right? And fine, if you're a Democrat, you're a reformist and you believe that, then that's whatever. That's fine, right? But I'm talking to the Marxist Leninists and the communists who are trying to figure out alternative ways to organize other than thinking about the next fucking Mamdani or the next, you know what I mean? The next fucking candidate in this or that election that gets elected for a certain term and then can be out again. And it only matters is that in that it only matters that far in a swing state essentially. So it's just like what the amount of people that vote is less and less all the fucking time because people are checking out of the bourgeois circus of politics. Those are like the kind of people that we should be trying to reach, really, as communists, to bring on as supporters to like our type of struggle. Not necessarily all the like diehard liberal like sycophants and stuff, you know what I mean? Why don't we do some news? We'll do some geopolitics because instead of covering the bourgeois circus, yeah, I mean, I'm all the caucuses in DSA is the problem with DSA. And I'm not saying every single member in the DSA isn't doing good work in there. There are plenty of comrades who are doing good work in there. It's just not the work of building the DSA for the sake of building the DSA, but something other than that. Because you need an independent party. I find it hard to take a hard stance against lesser evil voting on all circumstances. Like if you are a trans in this country, there was one candidate advocating for trans genocide and one who wasn't for the ML person. Would it be wrong to vote for a Democrat out of self-preservation? No. No, I mean this is the thing. We're not talking about like individuals voting, right? Voting takes 5 minutes. I'm not talking about voting. I'm talking about how little voting matters. Mama, welcome in. I'm talking about how little voting matters. That your vote essentially like is manufactured, it's restricted, it's filtered through, etc., etc. Not only that, voting takes 5 minutes, right? Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Voting isn't like it's not like a moral thing. So like your vote takes 5 minutes. My point is like Marxist Leninists and content creators on the left, I guess, who that's what they do. That's what most of content creation, like other than TankTube, I can't think of many, and this is the most I talk about electoral politics here, essentially. But I can't think of like many other content creators who talk about anything else other than this or that DSA candidate or this or that fucking whatever, that like telling us why you should vote for this DNC person over this Republican. And most of their audience is agrees, at least with that. Most of their audience is already voting for those people. You know what I'm saying? So what, like, I get that it ends up just being it's a hangout and entertainment, and they all like to watch the politics together. They have a niche interest in U.S. bourgeois circus politics. You know what I mean? But like, we're kind like I'm interested in like trying to figure out politics that can actually work for us. You know what I mean? Like politics that is actually about like people building a different way forward that isn't just like running a campaign for this or that candidate. So like cuz like you say, I would wager to bet that any person in your area that is on the morally correct side would not cast their vote for the anti-trans person. But at the same time, you wouldn't shame people who said, I'm not even going to bother voting, right? Because them deciding not to vote is also justified at the same time. And that's why I'm saying the problem isn't whether someone votes or not. The problem is this focus on the left on just electoralism all the time. And people will even say, oh, I support this DSA candidate because they're building institutions. But the institutions they're talking about building is state institutions within the bourgeois state. What they're talking about is like setting up a breakfast program, but not in one that's independent of the state, but they're talking about like setting up like a state-owned breakfast program or passing a state policy that benefits people. And that's all well and good. But what I'm saying is let the Democrats do that work. Because what we should be doing is pooling as many people as we can together and building institutions outside of that. Because if we don't, when these institutions fail, there's going to be nothing there, right? When those institutions that they've built through the DSA or the DNC, through the actual state that are then beholden to the state, when those fail, what's left? Right? That's why I say we need to, like, those of us who are conscious of this problem of reformism need to come together, pool our resources together, and build alternative, like a people's school, a people's grocery store, and then eventually that becomes a people's state, right? That's what the Marxist-Leninist strategy is. And that's the thing that I kind of like, we're trying to focus on with like TankTube, I guess, is like creators that kind of uphold that line. You know? Yeah, or healthcare. Medicare for all, quote unquote. We know damn well they don't want to abolish private healthcare companies. Yes. And that's the other thing, right? Like you can't get universal healthcare. The best you'll get is like a single payer system, which is like similar to what a lot of people in the US already have. And I'm not discounting the people that don't have health insurance in the US, by the way. But I'm just pointing out that at the same time, the people that would be benefiting from that state healthcare system, that single payer healthcare system, also at the same time, you would have colonized people being subjected to racist discrimination or like having fucking like forcible sterilizations like they do in Canada, right? Or offering fucking euthanasia to disabled people, again, like they do in Canada. It's like you have to understand that if they do give you that kind of healthcare under a capitalist system, universal healthcare, it will be distorted and in the service of them more than you. And I'm not saying some people can't benefit from that healthcare for a while, but what I'm saying is it's not like up to the communists to run PR for them doing that. If a DSA candidate was running on that healthcare, what most Marxist Leninist parties traditionally would do is say, well, this is the problem. We agree with people needing universal health care, but this is why their strategy of trying to do that won't work. And this is the areas of their desire for free health care that don't go far enough, for example. Right? That's what the Marxist Leninist like reaction would be, is to explain the limitations of a DSA strategy or a DSA line. To say, like, oh, you want to increase the wages for all workers in New York for this company. Well, the Marxist Leninists would then say, what about increasing the wages for all workers of this company across the world? As a response to that, right? And then people go, oh yeah. And then realizing the limitations of trying to apply that under our current system helps to teach them that our system has those limitations at all. Whereas if you only hear as far as the social democrats are willing to go, you don't hear that. Well, what about guarantee this raise in pay for everybody who works for this company across the globe? Then other people don't think of that. Yeah, like right now, the cut in HUD funding in the US is causing the majority of permanent assistance housing programs to be forced to close and taking needed housing away from hundreds of thousands, if not millions here. Yep. We might spend a decade to get Medicare for all. Then we'll spend a decade failing to support or expand it. Instead, we need a system that centers people's interests entirely and permanently. Exactly. I mean, that's the thing, right? The infrastructure, let me ask you this, the infrastructure that exists in the US right now, if a policy of Medicare for all was passed, would it even be able to service everybody in the US right now as the public healthcare system exists there? Obviously not, right? It would be broken right from the get go. Canada was like that as well, and then it got further undermined, and you have the same problem here, right? Where people can't get fucking doctors, so they just go to the emergency, and then you know what? That makes the emergency backed up beyond belief. People can't get surgeries, then like it becomes a whole thing that then they use to try and discredit that very system. Yo, Neuro Riot, thank you so much for all the kick. What the hell? Full sends, skull emojis. Oh my goodness, comrade. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Neuro Riot. They're still coming. What the hell? Thank you, comrade. My goodness. The nondescript support tokens. Thank you so much, comrade. I appreciate that. Steph, welcome in. Hillary had to finally change her position to say trans rights are a legitimate concern because she lost and went on the whole rehabilitation tour about it. They truly don't care. Yes. I appreciate that. Oh, and GMO with a full send. Thank you, comrades. I appreciate your support. Thank you. Yeah, and the other thing that's Simchel with that comment you just made there, that raises another good point I was going to say as well, right? Which is that whether or not at the end of the day, I will say whether it's a DSA politician, a DNC politician, or even a Republican politician, I will say at the end of the day, it's not you voting that politician in that compels them to make the temporary gains that can make life a little bit more tolerable temporarily to workers, right? It's not you voting them in that does that. It's the pressure of the masses on them that compels them to do that, regardless of who's in that office. And that's, again, the most important thing we got to realize. right? Those concessions happen not because some individual has like wished it, but because there is that pressure to do that. Thank you, GMO. I appreciate those nondescript tokens. I mean that means a ton. So yeah, that's again to reiterate my position on this whole. It's not even a position on Graham Plattner. It's just a position on reformism and the DSA strategy as a whole. I'm sure there's lots of great comrades in the DSA, just the DSA leadership and the DSA as it exists as an entryist organization, from my perspective of a Marxist Leninist, can never build revolution. It can never contribute to the revolution. Only insofar as the people can learn about the limitations of trying reformism. That's as far as it can go. And the only way that we can help it do that job is by being critical of that program, by ideologically struggling against that strategy. That's the only way that the masses will also be aware of an alternative to the reformist strategy. Revolution doesn't just happen spontaneously, it happens because us revolutionaries like contribute to raising people's consciousness.